Hello, and a very warm welcome. It seems you have found your way to this quiet corner of our shared digital space. I am very glad you are here. Let me know in the comments below, wherever you are in the world, whatever the hour may be on your clock, and why you have found yourself here. Perhaps you are preparing for a night of rest, and you have sought out a voice to accompany you into sleep. Or perhaps you are at your desk, a difficult task before you, and you are looking for a calm stream of thought to help you focus. Or maybe, just maybe, you are here simply for the story itself, to immerse yourself in one of the great foundational texts of human culture. Whatever your reason, you are most welcome. Settle into your chair or into your bed. Adjust the light. Let the concerns of the day begin to recede, like a tide pulling away from the shore, leaving only the smooth, quiet sand of the present moment. As we begin, I find myself thinking of the many places from which you might be listening. It is a pleasant thought, this invisible gathering. Perhaps you are in a brightly lit flat in Tokyo, the city's hum, a distant murmur, or in a quiet study in Florence, surrounded by books, not far from where the ideas of the Renaissance first took flight. You could be on a farm in the American Midwest, the vast, dark fields stretching out under a canopy of stars, or in a coastal town in Chile, with the sound of the Pacific in the air. If you feel so inclined, you can leave a comment, letting us know where you are joining from. It is a way of making our quiet library feel a little more real, a little more connected. Tonight, our journey takes us back, far, far back. We are diving into the headwaters of the Western literary tradition, to an epic poem composed nearly 3,000 years ago, a story that was old even when Plato and Aristotle were discussing it. We are exploring Homer's The Odyssey. Before we can even begin with the narrative, it is essential that we understand the medium from which this story springs. The Odyssey, in its original form, was not a book to be read in silent solitude. It was an oral composition, a living performance. In the courts of chieftains and at public festivals, a trained bard, an aoidos, would stand, perhaps with a four-stringed lyre called a pharynx, and he would sing. For hours, sometimes for days, he would chant the ancient tales of heroes and gods. This was the primary form of entertainment, history, and cultural transmission for the society of the time. This oral tradition is baked into the very DNA of the poem's language. As we proceed, you will notice certain phrases repeating, like refrains in a song. These are known as epithets: rosy-fingered dawn, the wine-dark sea, grey-eyed Athena, resourceful Odysseus. To a modern reader accustomed to valuing originality in every line, this can seem repetitive. But for the oral poet, these were indispensable tools. They were formulaic building blocks, fitting perfectly into the strict meter of the verse, dactylic hexameter, and serving as mnemonic aids, allowing the bard to compose and recall tens of thousands of lines in the heat of performance. They create a stately incantatory effect, a rhythm that draws the listener into a world that is at once familiar and monumental, the world of epic. And what is the subject of this epic? It is a homecoming. The Greek word for this concept is nostos. It is the root of our modern word nostalgia, the ache for a lost home. But nostos is a far more profound and active concept. It is not merely a return to a geographical location. It is the struggle to reclaim one's identity, one's property, one's family, and one's rightful place in a social order that has disintegrated in one's absence. It is a journey from chaos back to order, a restoration of the self. The entire poem is an exploration of this single, powerful idea. Homer does not begin his tale at the beginning. He does not start with the end of the Trojan War and trace Odysseus's journey chronologically. Instead, he plunges us in medias res, into the middle of things. This is a deliberate and brilliant narrative choice. By starting 10 years after the war, with our hero long missing and presumed dead, Homer's immediate focus is not on Odysseus himself, but on the gaping wound his absence has torn in the fabric of his family and his kingdom. We are first made to understand the desperate need for his return before we even meet the man. So let us begin where Homer begins. Not on a storm-tossed sea, not in a monster's lair, but on the serene, radiant peak of Mount Olympus, the home of the gods. A divine council is in session. The gods are lounging, drinking nectar, and discussing the affairs of mortals, which seem to be their primary form of entertainment. Zeus, the king of gods and men, father of the Olympians, speaks first. His authority is immense, but it is not absolute. He must often negotiate and persuade the other deities. He is not thinking of Odysseus. His mind is on another, more recent tragedy, a story that serves as a dark mirror to the one we are about to hear. He muses on the fate of Agamemnon, the commander-in-chief of the Greek armies at Troy. Agamemnon's Nostos was a catastrophic failure. He returned home to Mycenae, a conquering hero, only to be ambushed and murdered in his own home by his queen, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Aegisthus. Zeus laments the folly of mortals, how they blame the gods for their own suffering. It is their own recklessness, he says, using the Greek word atasthelia, that brings them sorrows beyond what is fated. This story of Agamemnon is not a casual aside. It is the epic's critical counter-narrative. It is the ever-present example of what a homecoming can become if things go wrong, if the wife is unfaithful, if the son is weak, if the house is corrupted from within. The question of whether Odysseus's return will mirror or subvert Agamemnon's fate hangs over the entire poem. But there is one goddess in the assembly who has no patience for these general philosophical reflections. Her mind is fixed on a particular mortal. It is Athena, the daughter of Zeus, born fully formed from his head. She is the goddess of wisdom, of strategic warfare, of weaving, and of all forms of cunning and craft. Her eyes, which Homer repeatedly describes as glaukopis, a term that can mean grey-eyed or flashing-eyed or even owl-eyed, are bright with purpose. She has always held a special affection for Odysseus. She is his divine patron, his celestial counterpart. She sees in his mortal mind a reflection of her own divine intelligence. They share a quality the Greeks called metis, a particular kind of cunning intelligence, a knack for deception, disguise, and practical problem-solving. While other gods might favor brute strength or noble birth, Athena loves Odysseus for his mind. She interrupts her father, her voice sharp and clear. She challenges his detachment. She reminds him of Odysseus's unwavering piety, the countless oxen he sacrificed on the plains of Troy. How can such a man be abandoned to suffer so? Where is he? He is, she reminds them, a prisoner, not in a dungeon of stone and iron, but on a far more seductive prison, the island of Ogygia. The name Ogygia itself is resonant, possibly meaning the navel of the sea, a place at the very center of the world, yet utterly isolated from it. His jailer is the nymph Calypso. Her name is derived from the Greek verb kalyptein, which means to cover, to hide, or to conceal. She is, quite literally, the one who conceals him from the world. For 7 long years, Calypso has held Odysseus captive, not through force of arms, but through the force of her love and her divine power. Her island is a supernatural paradise. It is a place of perfect, unchanging nature, lush meadows, groves of alder and cypress, bubbling springs, and vines heavy with grapes. It is a world without winter, without struggle. And she has offered Odysseus the ultimate boon. She will make him immortal and ageless, to live with her forever in this state of bliss. This is a temptation of profound philosophical weight. It is the offer to escape the human condition itself, to escape struggle, pain, old age, and death. Yet, for Odysseus, this offer is a curse. Every single day, he rejects it. He performs his own ritual of grief, sitting on the rocks of the shore, looking out over the wine-dark sea and weeping. His tears are an active choice. He is weeping for his Nostos, for his mortal wife Penelope, for his son Telemachus, for his rocky, imperfect island of Ithaca. He is choosing the flawed, painful, and finite human experience over a sterile, changeless, and ultimately meaningless divine existence. His identity is tied to his home and his mortality, and without them, he is nothing. Athena's passionate advocacy finds its mark. Zeus, the arbiter of cosmic justice, concedes that Odysseus's suffering has gone on long enough. He agrees to set a plan in motion. He will dispatch the messenger god, Hermes, the slayer of Argus, the god of travelers and thresholds, to fly to Ogygia and deliver the final, unarguable command to Calypso: let the man go. At the same time, Athena will take matters into her own hands on the mortal plane. She will journey to Ithaca, to the heart of the problem, to begin preparing the ground for the master's return. She must first awaken the hero's son, and so the epic's focus shifts. We descend from the luminous, orderly halls of Olympus to the dusty, sun-bleached reality of Ithaca. We are brought to the palace of Odysseus, and what we find is not a kingdom, but a festering wound. The house is in a state of advanced decay, not physically, but morally. It has been overrun by a parasitic swarm, the suitors. There are 108 of them in total, a plague of young, arrogant noblemen from Ithaca and the surrounding islands. They have decided, out of a combination of ambition and wishful thinking, that Odysseus must be dead. Consequently, his wife, Queen Penelope, is the most powerful and wealthy widow in the region. They are all competing for her hand in marriage, for to marry the queen is to become the king. And so they have moved into Odysseus's palace. To fully grasp the horror of this situation, we must pause and linger on the ancient Greek concept of xenia. This word is often translated as hospitality, but that simple term fails to capture its deep religious significance. Xenia, or guest friendship, was a sacred and binding contract, a ritualized relationship between host and guest that was believed to be under the personal protection of Zeus himself, in his guise as Zeus Xenios, the protector of strangers. The rules were clear and absolute. A host was morally and religiously obligated to welcome any traveler who came to their door. They must offer food, a bath, a place to rest, and, upon departure, a gift. A host was forbidden from even asking the guest's name or their business until all their physical needs had been met. The guest, in turn, had their own set of obligations. They were to be gracious, to not overstay their welcome, and to never, ever abuse the generosity of their host. Xenia was what separated civilized people from barbarians. It was a network of trust that held their world together. The suitors represent the absolute and catastrophic perversion of this sacred law. They are the ultimate bad guests. They have not been invited. They will not leave. They are not weary travelers in need of rest. They are predators who have occupied the lair of an absent lion. Day after day, year after year, they hold their feasts in Odysseus's great hall. They slaughter his finest oxen, his fattest sheep, his bleating goats. They order his servants to pour his best wine. They are consuming his oikos, his household, from the inside out. They are eating his son's inheritance. They brawl, they shout, they treat the loyal servants with contempt and seduce the disloyal ones. Their behavior is not just rude, it is a profound act of impiety, a hubristic challenge to the order of the cosmos. In the midst of this swirling vortex of chaos stand two figures of tragic stillness. The first is Telemachus, the son of Odysseus. He was just an infant, wrapped in swaddling clothes, when his father sailed for Troy 20 years ago. He has no memory of the man. He has grown up in a house without a father, without a strong, authoritative male presence to guide him from boyhood to manhood. He is now about 20 years old, physically a man, but emotionally and psychologically, he is adrift. He is described as being prone to daydreams and fits of despair. He is intelligent and his heart is in the right place, but he is paralyzed by a sense of futility. He sees the slow-motion destruction of his family's legacy every single day, and he is powerless to stop it. He is a prince in name only, an exile in his own home. And then there is Penelope. She is one of the most remarkable and complex characters in the entire Western canon. She is far more than a passive, weeping wife. She is the true counterpart to Odysseus. Where he has his strength and fame, she has her endurance and her reputation. And where he is famous for his meaty, his cunning intelligence, she is his equal. For 3 years, she has managed to hold the ravenous pack of suitors at bay with a trick worthy of Odysseus himself. She announced to them that she, as a pious wife, could not possibly remarry until she had completed a proper burial shroud for her aging father-in-law, the old king Laertes. It was a task of filial duty that the suitors, for all their arrogance, could not publicly object to without looking impious themselves. And so, every day, she would set up her great loom in the main hall, a visible symbol of her industry and grief. She would work diligently, the shuttle flying back and forth, weaving an intricate and beautiful tapestry. But every night, when the suitors were lost in their drunken sleep, she would go to the loom by torchlight with her most trusted maids, and she would unpick the work she had done that day. This act of weaving and unweaving is a powerful, multivalent symbol. She is literally weaving time, and then unweaving it, holding her life and the fate of her kingdom in a state of perpetual suspension. She is a wife, but not a wife, a widow, but not yet a widow. Her weaving is a stay against a future she refuses to accept. However, this brilliant stratagem has recently come to an end. A shameless and witless maid, one of her own women who had been sleeping with a suitor, betrayed her secret. The suitors burst in on her one night and caught her in the act of unraveling. Now, her best defense is gone. The pressure to choose one of them is at its absolute peak. Her situation is desperate. Into this house, simmering with tension and despair, Athena arrives. She does not descend in a blaze of divine glory, for that would overwhelm the mortals she intends to help. She comes in disguise, a tactic she shares with her favorite hero. She takes on the form and voice of Mentes, a Taphian sea captain, an old friend of her father's house. She finds Telemachus sitting amongst the suitors, his heart obsessed with grief. He is daydreaming of his mighty father, imagining him suddenly appearing and scattering the leeches who have infested his home. He is the first to spot the stranger standing at the threshold. In a moment that reveals his innate character, he is immediately filled with indignation that a guest should be left waiting. He springs up, rushes to the door, grasps the visitor's right hand and takes his bronze spear. He leads Mentes to a high-backed chair, far from the boisterous suitors, and offers him food and wine. In this one simple, unhesitating act of proper xenia, Telemachus proves that the seed of his father's nobility is still alive within him. Athena, in her disguise as Mentes, gently and expertly probes the young man's spirit. She asks about his father, planting the seed of hope. What if he isn't dead? What if he is merely detained on some distant shore? She then shifts from consolation to exhortation. She gives him a mission, a concrete plan of action that will serve as the catalyst for his journey into manhood. First, she tells him, he must call an assembly of the lords of Ithaca. He must stand before them and formally, publicly, denounce the suitors and order them to disperse. Second, he must find the best ship he can, with a crew of 20 men, and he must set sail. He must leave the confines of his island for the first time in his life, and venture into the wide world in search of news of his father. He is to go first to Pylos, to seek the counsel of the wise and ancient King Nestor. From there, he must travel to Sparta, to the court of red-haired Menelaus. These were the last of the Achaean leaders to see Odysseus. They may know something. "You are a boy no longer," she tells him, her words striking him with the force of a divine command. With this, she departs, flying away like a bird, and Telemachus is left with a new fire in his heart. He knows, with a sudden, intuitive certainty, that he has been in the presence of a god. The effect is instantaneous. He walks back into the great hall with a new bearing. The court bard, Phemius, is singing a sad song, a new ballad about the sorrowful return of the Achaeans from Troy. Penelope, her heart already heavy, hears it from her rooms upstairs. She comes down and weeping, begs the bard to choose a different, less painful theme. At this moment, Telemachus intervenes. In a display of authority that stuns everyone present, he gently but firmly rebukes his own mother. He tells her that the bard is not to blame, for it is Zeus who weaves the fates of men. He tells her to go back to her own quarters, to her loom and her distaff, and to leave the business of speech to the men of the house. "And to me most of all," he declares, "for mine is the power in this household." The suitors are slack-jawed with astonishment. This is not the moody, withdrawn boy they are used to bullying. Penelope too is amazed. She sees a flicker of his father in him for the first time. She wordlessly retreats to her chamber to ponder her son's transformation. This section of the epic, books 1 through 4, is known as the Telemachy. It is the story of Telemachus's own Odyssey, a journey not across the sea, but across the threshold from boyhood to manhood, so that he can be a worthy son when his father finally returns. The very next morning, Telemachus acts. He summons the first public assembly to be held in Ithaca in the 20 years since Odysseus departed. He strides into the agora, his bronze spear in hand, no longer a boy, but a prince. He makes a passionate, if somewhat clumsy, speech. He divides his complaint into two parts. First, he has lost his noble father. Second, and even worse, his house is being destroyed by the suitors. He speaks with real emotion, at one point breaking down in tears and dashing his speaker's scepter to the ground. But his appeal to the island's elders is ultimately ineffective. The social and moral fabric of Ithaca has rotted through. The lead suitor, Antinous, a man of pure arrogance and violence, rises to speak. He brazenly deflects all blame. He paints Penelope as a manipulative tease, revealing her trick with the shroud and demanding that Telemachus send her back to her father's house to be married off. Another suitor, the smooth-talking and deceitful Eurymachus, dismisses a terrifying omen, two eagles sent by Zeus that tear at each other in the sky above the assembly, as mere birdwatching. He threatens the old prophet who dares to interpret it correctly. The assembly dissolves in chaos and inaction, a clear demonstration that the civic order of Ithaca is broken beyond repair. Telemachus, though publicly humiliated, is not deterred. He walks to the seashore and prays to Athena, who appears to him disguised as his father's old friend and his own mentor, a man named, appropriately, Mentor. She reassures him and promises to help him find a ship and a crew. While Telemachus goes home to prepare for his journey, Athena takes matters into her own hands. Disguised as Telemachus himself, she goes through the town, gathering a loyal crew of 20 men and borrowing a fast ship. That night, under the cover of darkness, Telemachus tells his loyal old nurse, Euryclea, of his plans, swearing her to secrecy. As Athena casts a spell of sleep over the drunken suitors, Telemachus and his crew load their provisions and slip out of the harbor. Guided by Athena Mentor, they set sail for Pylos, leaving the corrupted island behind them. It is his first true act of rebellion, his first step into the wider, heroic world. Their journey across the dark sea brings them to Pylos, the kingdom of the Gerenian horsemen, the wise and venerable King Nestor. The contrast with Ithaca is immediate and overwhelming. They arrive to find the entire city on the shore, engaged in a massive and orderly religious ceremony. 9 groups of 500 citizens are sacrificing 9 black bulls apiece to the god Poseidon. This is a society grounded in piety and order, a world away from the lawless chaos of Odysseus's palace. Telemachus is intimidated. He is just a boy, and Nestor is a living legend, a revered elder who fought at Troy. He doesn't know what to say, but Athena, as mentor, gives him a push. A little courage is what you need now, she tells him. The gods don't leave a man entirely to his own devices. Nestor's son, Pisistratus, greets them and invites them to join the feast, demonstrating the proper Pylian understanding of Xenia. Nestor himself receives Telemachus with great kindness. He praises Odysseus, calling him a man of unparalleled cunning with whom he never disagreed. But he has no news of his fate. He recounts in great, loving detail the story of the homecomings of the other Greek heroes. He explains how the fleet split into 2 factions after the war, one led by Menelaus that wanted to leave immediately, and one led by Agamemnon that wanted to stay and make sacrifices. Odysseus initially left with Nestor, but then had a change of heart and turned back to rejoin Agamemnon. That was the last Nestor ever saw of him. Nestor's speech is long and rambling, a characteristic of his old age, but it serves a crucial purpose in Telemachus's education. He learns of the fates of other heroes, and he hears for a second time the detailed, grim story of Agamemnon's murder and the subsequent revenge taken by his son, Orestes. This story of Orestes, the son who successfully avenged his father, is held up as a model for Telemachus. It is a subtle but constant encouragement for him to find his own strength. Though Nestor has no direct information, he insists that Telemachus must continue his quest. He must go to Sparta and question Menelaus, who returned home by a much more circuitous route and may have heard something on his travels. In an act of supreme generosity that perfectly illustrates Xenia, Nestor not only provides Telemachus with a chariot and horses for the overland journey, but he sends his own beloved son, Pisistratus, to be his companion and guide. The two young men, both sons of famous fathers, quickly form a bond of friendship, and Telemachus continues his education in the ways of the world. They travel for 2 days, arriving at the low-lying land of Lacedaemon, the kingdom of Sparta. The court of Menelaus and Helen is a different world entirely. If Pylos was a model of rustic piety, Sparta is a showcase of staggering, almost unimaginable wealth. The palace has a supernatural gleam, with halls of gold, silver, amber, and ivory. The treasures are the spoils of Menelaus's own long and wandering return from Troy, which took him to Cyprus, Phoenicia, and, crucially, to Egypt. But for all its glittering splendor, the palace is haunted by a deep and pervasive sadness. Menelaus and Helen are living with the ghosts of the war that was fought over her. When they see Telemachus, they are overcome with memories of Odysseus. Helen enters, a figure of breathtaking but tragic beauty. She is no longer the thoughtless girl who ran off with Paris. She is a woman who has seen the devastating consequences of her actions. She moves with a kind of weary grace, her past a constant, invisible burden. As they begin to speak of Troy, the memories become too painful and they all start to weep. To counteract this, Helen performs an act that is both kind and deeply unsettling. She slips a drug into the wine they are drinking, a substance called nepenthe. Homer describes it as a drug to lull all pain and anger, to banish all memory of evil. Under its influence, a person could not shed a single tear, even if their own mother and father died before their eyes. It is a powerful symbol of the trauma that lies just beneath the surface of their opulent lives. They can only confront their past by medicating themselves against its pain. Under the influence of the drug, they are able to share stories. Both Menelaus and Helen immediately recognize Telemachus as the son of Odysseus. He has his father's feet, his hands, his eyes, the cut of his hair. Helen recounts a story of Odysseus's cunning, how he disguised himself as a wretched beggar, infiltrated the city of Troy, and returned with vital intelligence. Menelaus tells an even more famous tale of how he and other Greek heroes hid inside the wooden horse, and how Helen, perhaps possessed by a god or acting on a treacherous impulse, circled the horse, calling out the names of the Greek captains and perfectly mimicking the voices of their wives, tempting them to reveal themselves. Only Odysseus's iron self-control, clamping his hand over another soldier's mouth, saved them all. Finally, Telemachus asks the question he has traveled so far to ask, and Menelaus delivers the crucial intelligence. He recounts his own difficult nostos. He was stranded for a long time in Egypt until a sea goddess advised him to capture Proteus, the prophetic, shape-shifting old man of the sea. Menelaus and his men disguised themselves as seals and ambushed the ancient god. He describes the terrifying struggle as Proteus transformed into a lion, a serpent, a panther, a giant boar, then into running water, and finally into a towering tree. But they held on. Once subdued, Proteus revealed everything. He told Menelaus the fates of the other Greeks, including the murder of his brother Agamemnon. And then he told him of Odysseus. He is not dead, he is alive, but he is a prisoner on an island, held captive by the nymph Calypso, weeping in her halls. He has no ship and no crew to escape. This is it. The confirmation, the first concrete news in a decade. Odysseus lives. Telemachus's quest has been a success. He has found not his father, but the knowledge of his father, and in doing so, he has found himself. But as Telemachus is learning this vital news in Sparta, the camera of the epic cuts back to Ithaca. The suitors, led by Antinous, have learned of Telemachus's departure. Their mockery has curdled into genuine alarm. The boy they dismissed has shown initiative and courage and is now consorting with powerful kings. He is becoming a real threat, and so they form a cowardly and murderous plot. They will take a ship, lie in wait in the straits between Ithaca and the neighboring island of Same, and ambush Telemachus on his way home. They will murder him and divide his property among themselves. The palace herald, Medon, overhears their plot and rushes to tell Penelope. She is utterly shattered. She had already lost a husband, and now she is on the verge of losing her son. She collapses in grief, her maids weeping all around her. In her despair, she prays to her patron goddess Athena, and Athena hears her. That night, she sends a phantom, an eidolon, in the shape of Penelope's sister, Iphthime. The phantom comes to Penelope in a dream and reassures her, telling her not to fear, for her son travels with a guardian such as all men would wish to have beside them, a clear, if veiled, reference to Athena herself. And it is here, at the end of Book 4, that we will pause our narrative for tonight. We have reached the culmination of the Telemachy. The stage is set. Telemachus has matured into a young man of purpose. The suitors have revealed the true depths of their villainy. Penelope's long vigil has been given a sliver of hope, and for the first time, everyone involved in the drama knows the truth. Odysseus is alive. All that remains is for the hero himself to finally break free from his gilded cage and begin the last, most perilous leg of his long journey home. We begin again on the luminous peak of Mount Olympus. The gods are once more in council, and once more it is the grey-eyed goddess Athena who speaks for her champion. She has fulfilled her part of the plan. She has stirred the spirit of Telemachus and set him on a path to manhood. Now, she argues, it is time for the gods to fulfill theirs. She paints a vivid picture for her father, Zeus, of Odysseus's plight, a man of virtue and piety, languishing on a distant island, consumed by a grief so profound it has become his daily ritual, while at his home, villains plot the murder of his only son. Her appeal is a blend of legal argument and emotional plea, a reminder to the king of the gods that the scales of cosmic justice are tipped wrongly and must be set right. Zeus, the cloud gatherer, agrees. He turns to his son, the swift messenger Hermes, and gives the command. "Go," he says, "and tell the nymph of the lovely braids our fixed decree. The long-enduring Odysseus shall return home." The decree is specific. He is to have no escort, neither god nor mortal man. He must build his own raft and suffer for 20 days upon the sea before he reaches the land of the Phaeacians, who are kin to the gods. They, in turn, will honor him and convey him home to Ithaca with treasures far greater than any he would have won from Troy. It is fated. His suffering is not yet over, but its end is now in sight. Hermes obeys without question. He binds on his beautiful, ambrosial golden sandals, which carry him over the water and the boundless earth with the speed of the wind. He takes his wand, with which he can lull men's eyes to sleep or awaken them at will. He flashes down from the peaks of Olympus, across the mountains of Pieria, and then swoops down to the sea, skimming the waves like a seagull hunting for fish. His arrival at the distant island of Ogygia is described in loving detail. We are made to see this place not as a prison of stone, but as a paradise of nature. A great fire of fragrant cedar and juniper wood burns on the hearth. The air is filled with the sound of Calypso's beautiful voice as she weaves at her golden loom with a golden shuttle. A lush wood of alder, poplar, and sweet-smelling cypress surrounds her cave. Falcons and owls roost in its branches. A network of 4 springs provides crystal-clear water, and all around are soft meadows vibrant with violets and wild parsley. Homer is clear. This is a place so beautiful that even an immortal god, upon seeing it, would be filled with wonder and delight. This is what Odysseus is being asked to give up. Calypso recognizes Hermes immediately and offers him the proper xenia of the gods, seating him on a shining chair and offering him ambrosia and nectar. But she knows this is no social call. She asks him bluntly why he has come. Hermes delivers the message from Zeus. It is not a request, it is an order. She must release Odysseus. Calypso shudders with indignation. She erupts in a bitter, passionate speech, a rare moment in ancient literature where a female character powerfully articulates a sense of injustice against the ruling patriarchy. "You gods are vicious," she cries, "scandalous, jealous beyond all other beings. You resent it if a goddess sleeps with a mortal man openly as his wife." She cites examples. The goddess Dawn chose Orion as her lover, and the chaste Artemis shot him down with her arrows. The goddess Demeter lay with a mortal in a thrice-ploughed field, and Zeus struck him dead with a thunderbolt. Now it is her turn. She loves Odysseus. She saved him, clinging to his keel, the lone survivor of Zeus's own lightning strike. She offered him immortality and eternal youth, and for this, she is being punished. Her rage is understandable, her logic is powerful, but it is futile. She knows, as all gods know, that the will of Zeus is irresistible. With a heavy heart, she submits. "Let him go then," she says, "if that is the command. But I will give him no escort. I will give him directions and help him build a raft, but the passage is his to make." She goes to find Odysseus, and Homer shows him to us for the very first time, not as a mighty warrior, but as a figure of profound grief. He is sitting on a rock on the shore, his accustomed place. His eyes are never dry of tears, his life force ebbing away in his sorrow for home. The nights are spent with Calypso, a goddess who desires him, but his days are spent in weeping, his heart broken with longing. Calypso delivers the news. He is free to go. But Odysseus, a man whose entire existence for the past decade has been defined by deception, peril, and the cruel whims of gods, does not rejoice. He is immediately suspicious. This must be another trick. "Goddess," he says, his caution overriding any sense of relief. "It is something else you are planning, not my safe passage." He cannot believe she expects him to cross the dangerous sea on a flimsy raft. He will not even begin the work until she swears a great unbreakable oath by the river Styx, the most sacred and binding oath a god can make, that she is not plotting more harm against him. His caution is the hallmark of his character, his polymetis. He has learned through bitter suffering that the world is a treacherous place and that survival depends on relentless vigilance. Calypso, smiling at his cunning, swears the oath. That evening, they share a final meal. Calypso once more makes her case, her last desperate plea. She looks at him, this mortal man she loves, and asks him directly, "Are you really so keen to go back to that home you long for? If you only knew what pains you are destined to suffer before you reach your native land, you would stay here with me and be immortal. Surely I am not less beautiful than your wife. It is not fitting for a mortal woman to compete with a goddess in form and face." Odysseus's reply is a masterpiece of diplomacy and a profound declaration of his core values. It is one of the most important speeches in the entire epic. First, he is diplomatic. He concedes every point. "Goddess and queen," he begins, "do not be angry with me. I know all this myself. I know that my wise Penelope, when it comes to appearance, is a lesser woman to look at than you. She is mortal, you are immortal and ageless." He validates Calypso's feelings completely, but then he pivots to the central truth of his existence. "Even so," he continues, "what I want and long for every day is to go home and see the day of my return. And if one of the gods should wreck me on the wine-dark sea, I will have to bear it. For I have a heart in my breast that is accustomed to suffering. I have been through much and toiled much in the waves and in the war. Let this be added to the rest." Let us pause and fully absorb the weight of this statement. He is not choosing Penelope over Calypso because she is better or more beautiful. He is choosing his own story. He is choosing a life that has meaning because it is finite, because it involves struggle, and because it is anchored to a specific place and a specific person who is part of his identity. He is choosing mortality. He is choosing to be Odysseus, king of Ithaca, husband of Penelope, rather than an anonymous, immortal consort on a forgotten island. He is choosing the difficult path of Nostos over the easy escape of eternal bliss. The next 4 days are spent in labor. Odysseus, the man of many skills, becomes Odysseus the shipwright. Calypso shows him where to find the best timber, and he fells 20 trees with a great bronze axe. He skillfully adzes the timbers, planes them, and joins them together, building a broad, sturdy raft. He erects a deck, a mast, and a steering oar. Calypso provides him with cloth for a sail and provisions for his journey, water, wine, and food. On the 5th day, he sets sail, his heart filled with a fragile joy. For 17 days, he navigates with expert skill, steering by the constellations as Calypso had instructed, keeping the Great Bear on his left. He is in sight of Scheria, the land of the Phaeacians, when his ordeal begins anew. His divine nemesis, the earth-shaker Poseidon, returning from a trip to Ethiopia, spots his tiny raft on the vast sea. The sea god is enraged. He sees that the other gods have conspired to free Odysseus behind his back. "So," he roars, "the gods have changed their minds about Odysseus while I was away." He summons the clouds and stirs the sea into a chaotic fury, unleashing all the winds at once. The storm that follows is described in terrifying, epic terms. The raft is overwhelmed. A giant wave snaps the mast in two. Odysseus is hurled into the churning water. He is weighed down by the fine clothes Calypso gave him, and he struggles for a long time before he can surface. He manages to clamber back onto the shattered remains of his raft, escaping immediate death. He is adrift, helpless, like thistledown in autumn, blown this way and that. At this moment of utter despair, a minor goddess intervenes. Leucothea, the white goddess, who was once a mortal woman named Ino, takes pity on him. She appears in the form of a seagull, perches on his raft, and speaks to him. She tells him to abandon the raft, take off his heavy clothes, and swim for the shore. She gives him her immortal veil, her credemnon, and tells him to tie it around his chest. It will protect him from harm. Once he reaches the shore, he must throw it back into the sea without looking. Odysseus, ever cautious, hesitates. Is this another divine trick? He decides to stick with his raft as long as it holds together. But a moment later, a colossal wave sent by Poseidon smashes the raft into splinters. Now he has no choice. He straddles a single beam and ties the magical veil around his chest. Poseidon, seeing this, has one last sneering word: "Suffer on," and then departs, leaving him to his fate. Now it is Athena who steps in. She calms the winds, leaving only the north wind to blow him toward land. For 2 days and 2 nights, Odysseus drifts and swims, his heart filled with the fear of death. On the morning of the 3rd day, he is close enough to see land, but his relief turns to horror. He is approaching a rocky, treacherous coast with jagged reefs and sheer cliffs against which the waves crash with deadly force. There is no beach, no harbour, no safe place to land. A great wave lifts him and is about to smash him against the rocks. With a last surge of strength, he grabs onto a rock and clings to it, but the wave's backwash rips him away, tearing the skin from his hands. He is pulled under and would have died then and there, but Athena inspires him with a final, brilliant idea. He swims along the coastline, just outside the breakers, searching for a gentler landing. He finds the mouth of a river. He prays to the anonymous river god, a fellow divinity, to take pity on him. The river god hears his prayer, calms the current, and allows him to swim into the fresh water and finally collapse, half dead, on the bank. He unties the goddess's veil and, averting his eyes as instructed, throws it back into the water. He is naked, exhausted, his body swollen and bruised. He is faced with one last dilemma. If he sleeps by the river, he may freeze to death. If he climbs the hill into the woods, he may be attacked by wild animals. He chooses the woods. He finds a thicket of 2 olive trees, one wild and one cultivated, so densely intertwined that they block the wind and rain. This double olive tree is a powerful symbol, perhaps representing his own dual nature, the wild survivor and the cultivated king. He crawls into this natural shelter, piles leaves over himself for warmth, and falls into a deep, healing sleep, like a man burying an ember in the ashes to save it for the next day. And here, our perspective shifts again. We leave the exhausted hero in his primitive shelter and are introduced to the land he has reached, Scheria, the home of the Phaeacians. These are a remarkable people. They are kin to the gods, but mortal. They live a life of perfect peace and prosperity, far from the conflicts of other men. They are master sailors and shipbuilders, but their ships are magical, needing no rudder or steersman, for they understand the thoughts of their crew and navigate on their own. They are a people living in a kind of dreamlike utopian state, halfway between the world of men and the world of the gods. They are the perfect audience for the story Odysseus is about to tell. It is Athena, the master strategist, who orchestrates the next crucial encounter. She goes to the palace of the Phaeacian king, Alcinous. She enters the chamber of his daughter, the princess Nausicaa, a young woman who is as beautiful as a goddess. Athena takes the form of one of Nausicaa's close friends and appears to her in a dream. In the dream, she gently chides the princess. "Nausicaa," she says, "why are you so careless? You have all these fine clothes lying around in a heap, and your wedding day is not far off. She reminds her of the importance of her reputation and suggests that she take her maids down to the river the next morning to do the laundry. She subtly plants the idea of a potential suitor, appealing directly to the thoughts and anxieties of a young woman of marriageable age. Athena does not simply command. She manipulates situations with a deep understanding of human psychology. Nausicaa awakens as dawn with her rosy fingers touches the sky. The dream is vivid in her mind. She goes to her parents. She is too shy to mention marriage directly, so she frames her request in practical terms, speaking of the need for her father and brothers to have clean clothes. Her father, Alcinous, understands her true motives and smiles, granting her request. A mule cart is prepared, and Nausicaa and her maids, laughing and chattering, head down to the river with the laundry. The scene at the river is one of pure, idyllic charm. They wash the clothes, spread them on the clean pebbles to dry, bathe themselves, and then have a picnic. Afterwards, to pass the time, they begin to play a game with a ball. Nausicaa, in a moment of playful excitement, throws the ball to one of her maids, who misses it. The ball lands in a deep eddy in the river, and the girls all let out a loud shriek. That shriek pierces the deep sleep of Odysseus. He awakens in his olive thicket shelter. His first thought is one of anxiety and analysis. Man of misery, he asks himself. Whose land have I come to now? Are they violent and savage, or are they God-fearing and hospitable to strangers? He hears the female voices and wonders if they are nymphs. He is faced with a perilous social dilemma. He is a naked, filthy, brine-caked man. To emerge suddenly would terrify them. He breaks off a leafy branch from an olive tree to cover his nakedness and steps out. Like a mountain lion, sure of its strength, that advances battered by wind and rain, its eyes blazing. The maids, seeing this terrifying figure, scatter in panic, but one remains. Nausicaa. Athena has put courage into her heart, and she stands her ground. Odysseus is now faced with a crucial choice, which Homer describes as a debate in his sharp mind. Should he run forward and clasp her knees in the traditional gesture of a suppliant? Or should he keep his distance and try to win her over with gentle words? He wisely chooses the latter. To touch her would be aggressive and presumptuous. The speech he delivers is a masterclass in persuasion, a perfect example of his famous métis. It is structured with exquisite care. He begins with a question that is also a profound compliment. I supplicate you, my lady, are you a goddess or a mortal? He compares her to Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt. This is a subtle way of acknowledging her youth and chastity. Then, he says if she is a mortal, her parents and brothers must be incredibly proud of her. But the man who will win her as his bride will be the most blessed of all. He then introduces a beautiful and carefully chosen simile. He says he has never seen a mortal as lovely, except for one time on the sacred island of Delos, where he saw a young palm tree growing by the altar of Apollo. The comparison is brilliant. It is not a comparison to a flower or another beautiful object, but to a sacred thing he saw in a sacred place. It demonstrates his piety and his well-traveled, noble background, all while flattering her. He briefly tells her of his 20-day ordeal at sea and his desperate situation. He ends by asking only for a rag to cover himself and for directions to the city, and he concludes with a blessing for her, a prayer that the gods will grant her everything her heart desires, a husband, a home, and homophrosyne, a like-minded harmony between husband and wife, which he calls the greatest good on earth. This last part is not just a blessing for her, it is a poignant expression of what he himself has lost and longs for more than anything. Nausicaa is not just charmed, she is impressed. She responds with a composure and wisdom far beyond her years. She recognizes that this is no common vagrant. Stranger, she says, you do not seem to be a bad man or a fool. She articulates the core principle of Xenia. It is Zeus who gives good fortune to men, to the good and the bad, to each as he sees fit. You must bear what he has given you. But now that you have come to our city and our land, you will not lack for clothes or anything else that a wretched suppliant has a right to expect. She calls back her maids, scolding them for their fear. She orders them to give the stranger food and drink and to bathe him in the river. Odysseus, however, demurs. He is too ashamed to bathe naked in front of these young women, so he asks them to stand aside. He washes the caked salt from his body and anoints himself with oil. When he is finished, Athena intervenes, making him appear taller, more massive, and more handsome, causing his hair to flow down from his head in thick curls, like hyacinth flowers. He walks back to the shore and sits down, gleaming with grace and beauty. Nausicaa gazes at him in admiration, whispering to her maids that she wishes such a man could be her husband. She now gives him a set of careful, intelligent instructions for getting to the palace. She is acutely aware of social propriety. She cannot be seen walking into the city with a strange, handsome man, as it would cause malicious gossip among the insolent men of the town. So she tells him to follow the cart at a distance. When they reach the city, he is to wait in a sacred grove of Athena just outside the walls. Once she has reached her home, he should then proceed into the city and ask for the palace of her father, Alcinous. And then she gives him the most crucial piece of advice. When he enters the palace, he must walk past her father, the king, and go directly to her mother, Queen Arete. If she looks on you with favor, Nausicaa says, then you may have hope of seeing your friends and returning to your own high-roofed house and your native land. This tells us, and Odysseus, something vital about the Phaeacian court. The queen holds the true power and influence. Odysseus meticulously follows her instructions. He waits in the sacred grove and offers a prayer to Athena. Athena hears him but does not appear to him in her true form, out of respect for her uncle Poseidon's lingering anger. Instead, she shrouds Odysseus in a thick mist, a magical cloak of invisibility, so that he can walk through the city streets without being questioned or harassed by the proud Phaeacian sailors. She also appears to him in the guise of a young girl carrying a water pitcher, who guides him directly to the palace. The palace of Alcinous is described as a place of otherworldly wonder. The walls are of bronze, the doors are of gold, the doorposts and lintel of silver. On either side of the entrance stand two immortal, ever-vigilant dogs, one of gold and one of silver, crafted by the god Hephaestus himself. The garden is a miracle of perpetual fertility. Pear, pomegranate, apple, fig and olive trees bear fruit year-round. A vineyard produces a constant supply of grapes. It is a world without seasons, without decay, without labor. This is the magical, protected world that Odysseus, a man defined by his suffering and labor, now enters. The mist conceals him as he walks through the great hall where the Phaeacian lords are feasting. He passes by King Alcinous and goes straight to the queen. He kneels, throws his arms around Queen Arete's knees in the classic posture of a desperate suppliant, and at that moment, the mist dissolves. He is suddenly, shockingly visible to the entire court. The hall falls silent. Odysseus makes his plea. It is short and to the point. He has suffered much. All he asks is for a ship to take him home. He then sits down in the ashes of the hearth, the lowest and most humble place in the hall, a gesture of complete self-abasement. The silence is broken by an old and respected lord, Echeneus, who gently rebukes the king. "Alcinous," he says, "this is not seemly for a stranger to be sitting in the ashes. Raise him up and give him a seat of honor." Alcinous immediately does so. He raises Odysseus, seats him in the chair of his favorite son, and orders food and wine to be brought. He then makes a public declaration to the court. "This stranger has come to my house. I do not know who he is, but tomorrow we will provide him with a ship and an escort and send him on his way, however far it may be." This is Xenia in its most perfect form. He promises to grant the stranger's fondest wish before he even knows his name. But Queen Arete is exceptionally sharp-eyed. As she looks at the stranger, she notices something familiar. The clothes he is wearing, the cloak and the tunic, are clothes that she and her own maids wove. She questions him directly, her query cutting through all politeness. "Stranger," she asks, "I will be the first to ask you, who are you and who gave you these clothes?" Odysseus is caught. He cannot lie. He now tells a partial but truthful version of his story. He recounts his 7 years with Calypso, his perilous journey on the raft, the storm sent by Poseidon, and his eventual arrival on their shore, where he was helped by her daughter, Nausicaa. He is very careful in his telling, taking pains to portray the princess in the best possible light, even taking the blame himself for not accompanying her directly into the city. Alcinous is so impressed by this eloquent and noble stranger that he exclaims he would be happy to have such a man as a son-in-law, but he quickly reaffirms his promise. Tomorrow, Odysseus will be sent home. The next day is dedicated to Odysseus. Alcinous calls an assembly and announces his decision to provide a ship. Then, they hold a feast and athletic games in his honor. During the games, a young, arrogant Phaeacian nobleman named Euryalus taunts Odysseus. Seeing the older, weary-looking man, he suggests that he looks more like a merchant captain, concerned with profits, than a true athlete or warrior. The insult strikes a nerve. Odysseus's heroic pride, his concern for his kleos or fame, is ignited. He gives a sharp retort, and then he proves his worth. He picks up a discus far heavier than the ones the Phaeacians had been using and, with a mighty roar, hurls it with such force that it flies far beyond all their marks. The Phaeacians are humbled into silence. He then challenges them to any other contest, boxing, wrestling, archery, except for running, as his legs are still weak from his ordeal at sea. His dormant, heroic power has been reawakened. That evening, at another feast, Alcinous calls for his court bard, Demodocus. Homer tells us the bard was blind, but that the muse loved him and gave him the gift of sweet song. This figure is often seen as a self-portrait of the poet himself. The bard, inspired by the muse, sings of a famous episode from the Trojan War, the quarrel between Achilles and Odysseus. As he listens to the tale of his own past, of his dead comrades and his former glory, Odysseus is overwhelmed by grief. He pulls his great purple cloak over his head to hide his tears. Only King Alcinous, sitting beside him, notices his guests' silent weeping. Tactfully, he stops the song and moves on to another entertainment. Later, after gifts have been presented to the stranger, Odysseus himself makes a request of the bard. He praises Demodocus, saying he must have been taught by the muse or by Apollo himself. And then he asks him to sing a specific story, the tale of the wooden horse, the brilliant stratagem that he, Odysseus, devised to finally conquer Troy. As Demodocus sings this story of his own greatest triumph, the story of his ultimate meeting, Odysseus is completely undone. He melts into tears, his sobs racking his body. Homer uses a devastatingly powerful simile. He weeps, like a woman who throws herself on the body of her dear husband, who has fallen in battle before his city and his people. She cries with piercing shrieks, while the enemy, from behind, beat her on the back and shoulders with their spears and led her away into slavery and wretchedness. This simile is shocking. It aligns the great hero in his moment of triumph with the experience of a conquered woman, a victim of war. It speaks to the profound trauma that lies at the core of his victory. King Alcinous can no longer ignore his guests' profound distress. He stops the music for a second time. The time for politeness, for disguise, for concealment is over. He turns to Odysseus and confronts him directly. "The time has come," he says. "Tell us your name. Tell us your land, your people, and your city. Tell us the story of your wanderings and why you weep so for the Greeks and for Troy." And so, at the beginning of Book 9, after 8 books of being a nameless stranger, a beggar, a victim, a hidden man, Odysseus finally reclaims his identity. He looks at the king and the assembled court, and he speaks the words that announce the beginning of his own great story. "Alcinous," he begins, "most glorious of all men, you ask me to speak of my sorrows. Where shall I begin? Where shall I end? For the gods have given me many. But first, I will tell you my name, so that you too may know it. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, who am known to all men for my wiles, and my fame reaches the heavens. I live in Ithaca, a sunlit island." For the next 4 books of the epic, Odysseus himself becomes the bard. He holds the Phaeacian court, and us, the readers, spellbound, as he recounts the 10 years of mythic adventures that have brought him from the shores of Troy to their magical kingdom. He begins his tale where it all began, with the end of the war. "From Ilium," he says, "the wind bore me to the Cicones in Ismarus." The first stop after Troy is not a land of monsters, but a city of men. And the first episode is not one of fantasy, but of brutal, mundane warfare. Odysseus and his men attack the city, sack it, kill the men, and take the women and treasure. This is what victorious armies did. After the victory, Odysseus, with his characteristic foresight, urges his men to leave quickly, but his men, foolish and mutinous, refuse. The fools would not listen, he says. They wanted to stay, to drink wine and feast on the sheep they had captured. This delay gives the Cicones time to gather reinforcements from the interior. They attack the Greeks on the beach the next morning. A fierce battle ensues, and the Greeks are driven back to their ships with heavy losses. 6 men from each of his 12 ships are killed. This first episode sets a crucial pattern. The first disaster of the Odyssey is not caused by a god or a monster, but by the greed, indiscipline, and foolishness of Odysseus's own crew. They will be a constant source of trouble, a dead weight holding him back, their flaws a stark contrast to his own heroic virtues. From there, a great storm sent by a wrathful Zeus blows their fleet off course for 9 days. They are pushed past the known landmarks of the Greek world, beyond Cythera, and into a world of myth and magic. Their next landfall is the coast of the Lotus Eaters. The natives of this land are not hostile, they are gentle and welcoming, but they possess a unique food, the lotus fruit. Odysseus sends 3 of his men as scouts to investigate the land. The Lotus Eaters receive them kindly and offer them the lotus to taste. The effect of this fruit is instantaneous and profound. It is a powerful narcotic that erases memory and desire. Any of them who ate the honey-sweet fruit of the lotus, Odysseus says, no longer wished to bring back news or to return, but they wanted to stay there with the Lotus Eaters, feeding on lotus and forgetting their homecoming. Here, the temptation is not violence or greed, but something far more subtle and insidious, the temptation of blissful apathy. The lotus offers an escape from the pain of memory, from the burden of nostos, from the very struggle that defines the human condition. It is a peaceful, vegetable-like existence, a kind of living death. Odysseus must act decisively. He personally goes ashore, seizes the 3 weeping men, and drags them back to the ship, tying them beneath the benches to prevent their escape. He then orders the rest of his crew to embark immediately, lest any more of them taste the lotus and forget their home. They sail on, their hearts grieving, and arrive at their next destination, the land of the Cyclopes. Here, Odysseus and his men will confront a being that represents the absolute antithesis of Greek civilization. Homer takes his time describing the Cyclopes. They are not just giants with one eye, they are a representation of a primitive, savage state of existence. They are a proud, lawless people, Odysseus explains. They do not plant crops or plough the land. They have no assemblies for council, no established laws. They live in hollow caves on the peaks of high mountains, and each one lays down the law for his own children and wives, and they have no regard for one another. The Cyclopes lack every single institution that a Greek would consider essential for a civilized life: agriculture, law, community, and political assembly. They are a nightmare vision of humanity without society. Yet their land is fertile and beautiful. It is a paradise waiting for cultivation. Across a channel from the mainland lies a small, wooded island teeming with wild goats. It is the perfect place for a settlement. But the Cyclopes have no ships and no knowledge of shipbuilding, so the island remains untouched. Odysseus and his crew land on this deserted island and feast on the wild goats. The next morning, Odysseus's fatal flaw, his boundless curiosity, takes over. He sees a large cave on the nearby mainland, smoke rising from it. He decides he must investigate. "I want to find out about these people," he tells his men. "What sort of men they are, whether they are violent, savage and unjust, or hospitable to strangers and with a God-fearing mind." It is a question he will have answered in the most brutal way imaginable. He takes his own ship and 12 of his best men, and he brings with him a goatskin full of a very special wine. It was a gift from a priest of Apollo whose town he had spared during the Cicones raid. It is a divine vintage, incredibly potent, which must be mixed with 20 parts water to be drinkable. This detail, which seems minor, will prove to be of critical importance. They reach the cave and find it empty. It is a shepherd's dwelling, filled with pens of lambs and kids and shelves stacked high with cheeses. His men plead with him to simply take some cheese and lambs and leave. It is the sensible, prudent thing to do, but Odysseus refuses. "I would not listen," he admits to the Phaeacians in a moment of self-incriminating honesty. It would have been much better if I had, but I wanted to see the man himself, and I hoped he might give me a guest gift. This is a disastrous miscalculation. He is trying to apply the rules of his own world, the sacred laws of Xenia, to a creature that exists entirely outside of that world. It is a failure of imagination that will cost him dearly. He and his men light a fire, make an offering to the gods, and sit down to wait. Then the cyclops, Polyphemus, returns. His arrival is terrifying. He is carrying a massive load of dry wood for his fire, which he throws down with a crash that sends the Greeks scrambling in terror into the back of the cave. He then drives his flock inside and seals the entrance with a colossal boulder, a rock so large that 22 four-wheeled wagons could not have budged it. They are trapped. It is only then that he spots the intruders. His question to them is a perversion of the host-guest relationship. He does not welcome them first. He immediately asks, "Strangers, who are you? Where do you sail from? Are you on some trading venture, or are you pirates who roam the seas risking your own lives to bring evil to others?" Odysseus, swallowing his fear, answers him, appealing to the laws of civilization. He identifies them as Achaeans, returning from Troy, who have been blown off course. He then makes a formal appeal to Xenia. "We are your suppliants," he says. "Respect the gods, for Zeus is the avenger of suppliants and strangers. He is the god of guests, who protects the rights of visitors." Polyphemus's reply is a chilling rejection of the entire moral and religious order of the Greek world. He lets out a laugh. "You are a fool, stranger," he sneers, "or else you have come from a very long way off to tell me to fear the gods. We Cyclopes do not care about Zeus, for we are much stronger than they are." And then, without another word, he performs an act of unspeakable horror. He lunges forward, seizes two of Odysseus's companions, and smashes their heads against the ground like puppies. Their brains spill out and wet the earth. He then tears them limb from limb and eats them raw, crunching the bones, leaving nothing behind. Odysseus and his men can only watch, frozen in terror, weeping and lifting their hands to Zeus in utter helplessness. After his gruesome meal, Polyphemus lies down to sleep among his sheep. Odysseus, in a moment of rage, considers drawing his sword and stabbing the monster, but his strategic mind stops him. He realizes that even if he killed the Cyclops, he and his men would still be trapped, for they could never move the massive stone from the door. He must devise a plan that allows for their escape. This is the essence of Mete, not just brute force, but foresight and cunning. The next morning, the horror is repeated. The Cyclops awakens, eats 2 more men for breakfast, and then leaves for the day, sealing the cave behind him. Left alone in the stinking darkness, Odysseus formulates his brilliant, desperate plan. He finds a huge club of green olive wood that Polyphemus was seasoning. It is as large as the mast of a ship. He has his men cut off a 6-foot length, sharpen it to a point, and then harden that point in the fire. He has them draw lots to see which 4 men will have the courage to help him wield it. That evening, when the monster returns and eats 2 more men for dinner, Odysseus puts the second part of his plan into action. He approaches the Cyclops, holding a wooden bowl of the unmixed, potent wine. He offers it to the giant. "Here, Cyclops," he says, "have some wine to wash down your meal of human flesh." Polyphemus, who has likely never tasted wine before, drinks it greedily and is delighted by its sweetness and power. He asks for another bowl and then another. As the potent liquor begins to cloud his mind, he makes a promise. "Give me your name," he says, "so that I can give you a guest gift that you will like." Odysseus, with his brilliant foresight, replies with the name that will save them all. "My name," he says, "is Autis." In Greek, Autis means nobody. The drunken giant chuckles. "Then this will be my gift to you, nobody," he says. "I will eat you last, after I have eaten all your companions." And with that, he collapses onto the floor in a drunken stupor. This is their chance. Odysseus and his 4 chosen men take the great olive stake and thrust its point into the embers of the fire until it is glowing red hot. Then, with all their combined strength, they lift it, aim it at the Cyclops' single, massive eye, and drive it in. Odysseus puts his full weight on it, twisting it like a shipwright drilling a timber. The effect is horrific. The eyeball hisses, its roots sizzling. Polyphemus lets out a deafening, blood-curdling roar of agony that echoes around the cave. He rips the smouldering stake from his eye, and the Greeks scatter in terror. His cries are heard by the other Cyclopes on the island. They gather outside his sealed cave and call out, "What is wrong, Polyphemus? Why are you shouting so? Is some mortal stealing your flocks? Is someone trying to kill you by treachery or by force?" And Polyphemus, blinded and in agony, shouts back the words that seal his own fate. "Autis me ktene. Nobody is killing me. Nobody is killing me by treachery." Hearing this, the other Cyclopes shrug their shoulders and leave. If nobody is harming you, they reason, then it must be a sickness sent by the great Zeus, and you should pray to your father, Poseidon. The brilliant pun has worked. His own words have betrayed him, but the ordeal is not over. They are still trapped. The next morning, the blind and groaning Polyphemus rolls the stone away from the door to let his flock out to pasture. But he sits in the entrance, his arms spread wide, running his hands over the backs of every sheep that passes to make sure no men are escaping among them. Odysseus, his mind working furiously, devises the final, ingenious step of their escape. He takes the thick-fleeced, powerful rams of the flock and, using willow withes, lashes them together in groups of 3. To the belly of the middle ram in each trio, he ties one of his men. For himself, he chooses the finest, largest ram in the entire flock, a magnificent creature that Polyphemus himself prizes. He clings to the thick wool of its belly, his hands and feet hooked deep into the fleece. One by one, the groups of rams pass by the blinded giant. He feels their woolly backs, but he does not detect the men hidden beneath. When the great ram carrying Odysseus comes last, Polyphemus stops it and speaks to it in a moment of startling, dramatic irony. "My dear ram," he says, "why are you last today? You are usually the first. Are you grieving for your master's eye, which that villain nobody has put out?" He strokes the ram and then lets it pass. Once they are clear of the cave, Odysseus unties his men and they quickly drive the best of the sheep down to their ship. They load the animals aboard and shove off from the cursed shore. They are safe. The plan has worked perfectly. But here, in this moment of triumph, Odysseus makes a terrible, hubristic error. His cunning mind gives way to his heroic pride. As they are sailing away, he cannot resist shouting back at the shore, taunting the blinded giant. "Cyclops," he yells, "so he was not such a weakling, the man whose friends you so brutally ate. Your evil deeds were bound to find you out." Enraged, Polyphemus rips off the top of a mountain and hurls it in the direction of the voice. The massive rock lands just in front of the ship, creating a huge wave that nearly drives them back onto the shore. His crew pleads with him in terror. "Be quiet! Why do you want to provoke this madman?" But Odysseus's pride is too great. He is overcome by the need for his enemy to know who defeated him. A hero's deeds are meaningless unless they are known. He needs the kleos, the fame. He shouts again, this time revealing the one piece of information that will damn him. "Cyclops, if any mortal man should ask you who it was that inflicted this shameful blinding upon you, tell him that it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes, who lives in Ithaca." It is a catastrophic mistake. He has given Polyphemus a name, and with a name comes the power to curse. The giant, having now learned the identity of his attacker, recalls an ancient prophecy that he would one day be blinded by a man named Odysseus. He had always imagined a great giant, not this small, clever man. He then lifts his hands to the sky and prays to his father, the sea god Poseidon. The prayer is specific and terrible. "Hear me, Poseidon," he cries. "Grant that Odysseus, the sacker of cities, may never reach his home. But if it is his fate to see his friends and his native land, may he return late and in a wretched state, having lost all his companions in a stranger's ship, and may he find a world of pain in his own house." Poseidon, the god of the sea, hears his son's prayer. And he will see that every single part of that curse is fulfilled. Odysseus's greatest act of cunning has been immediately undone by his own greatest flaw. He has escaped the cave, but he has not escaped his fate. The shadow of this curse will now follow him across every wave, all the way home. We resume our narrative in the great hall of Alcinous, the revered king of the Phaeacians. A profound, enchanted silence has fallen upon the assembly, a hush so deep it seems to have absorbed all sound. For what feels like a night that has stretched into a timeless epic of its own, the guiding voice of the poet has receded, and in his place, the voice of the hero himself has resonated through the megaron. Odysseus has concluded his great narrative, his apologoi. He has unburdened himself of the crushing weight of 10 years of wandering, a litany of horrors, temptations, and catastrophic losses that have been his constant companions since the smouldering ruins of Troy faded from his view. He has laid bare the torturous journey that has carved him into the man who now sits before them. A king in essence, but a beggar in appearance, a lone survivor whose very existence is a testament to his defining quality, endurance. The Phaeacian lords, a people whose lives are a gentle, untroubled stream of peace and prosperity, are struck dumb. They have been voyagers on his ship, companions in his suffering. They have been transported to a world beyond their imagining, a cosmos of savage, anthropophagus monsters, of seductive, detaining goddesses, and of capricious, wrathful gods. They have looked into the abyss of human suffering through the eyes of the one man who has navigated it and returned. It is the wise king Alcinous who finally breaks the spell, his voice filled with a newfound and palpable awe for his guest. He declares that a man of such stature, who has endured so much and has finally reached their shores, must not be delayed a moment longer, nor be sent away empty-handed. He calls upon the 12 great lords of Scheria, the pillars of his kingdom, to add to the already generous pile of gifts that have been set aside for the stranger. Each lord is to present Odysseus with a fresh cloak, a finely crafted tunic, and a full talent of precious gold. A talent was a substantial unit of weight, a fortune in itself. Multiplied by 12, in addition to the king's own gifts, it represents a treasure of immense value. Let us pause to understand the significance of this act. This is more than mere generosity. It is a formal public recognition of Odysseus's heroic stature. They are not simply giving charity to a vagrant, they are reinvesting him with the material wealth that is commensurate with his royal status. They will send him home not as the wretched suppliant who washed up on their shore, naked and broken, but as a great king, laden with a fortune that, as Alcinous himself notes, will far exceed any share of the Trojan spoils he might have won had he returned safely and promptly with the other heroes. This is Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality, elevated to its highest possible expression. It is a sacred, restorative, and re-enfranchising act. It is a testament to the sheer, world-altering power of a well-told story. Odysseus has, in a very real sense, sung for his supper, and in doing so has earned not just his passage home, but the very means by which he can begin to re-establish his kingship. The following day is a flurry of careful preparations and dignified farewells. A new black ship, the finest in the Phaeacian fleet, is hauled down to the sea. 52 of the best young oarsmen are selected for the honor of this final escort. The vast treasure, gleaming bronze cauldrons, masterful tripods used for religious ceremony, and as symbols of wealth, bolts of finely woven fabric, and the heavy talents of gold, is carefully stowed beneath the benches, balancing the ship. A final great feast is held in the palace. During this feast, Odysseus shares a final, poignant, and deeply meaningful exchange with the princess Nausicaa, the young woman whose courage, wisdom, and decency were the providential agents of his salvation. She stands by a pillar of the great hall, her beauty, as Homer tells us, radiating like that of a goddess. She catches his eye and speaks to him, her words a mixture of parting sentiment and a gentle assertion of her own importance in his story. "Farewell, stranger," she says. "And when you are in your own native land, remember me sometimes, for it is to me, first of all, that you owe your life." It is a simple, truthful statement, free of guile. Odysseus, his heart filled with a genuine and profound gratitude that cuts through his usual caution, replies with a solemn vow, the highest compliment a mortal can pay. Nausicaa, "Daughter of great-hearted Alcinous," he says, his voice resonating with sincerity. "May Zeus the Thunderer, the husband of Hera, grant that I reach my home and see the day of my return. And there, in my own hall, for all my remaining days, I will pray to you as to a goddess. For it was you, lady, who gave me back my life." He elevates her from a kind princess to a personal divine savior, promising her a form of private worship, a place in his own domestic pantheon. It is the perfect, graceful end to their remarkable encounter. He then boards the swift Phaeacian ship. He makes his way to the stern, where a comfortable bed with fresh linens and a thick blanket has been prepared for him. He lies down in silence, and as the 52 young men take their places at the benches and cast off the mooring lines, a deep and miraculous sleep, a direct and purposeful gift from the gods, falls upon Odysseus's eyelids. Homer takes pains to describe this sleep. It is unbroken, sweet, and most like death. This is not the fitful, anxious sleep of a soldier on watch or a survivor haunted by his past. It is a profound, healing oblivion, a symbolic death. For 20 years, Odysseus has been the man of constant vigilance, of a mind that never ceases to work, to plan, to anticipate the next threat. He is the man who never truly rests. But now, in the care of these magical sailors, on this ship that needs no pilot, on this final leg of his journey, he is finally able to surrender completely. He lies utterly still, a passenger at last, his body a silent vessel, as the ship, with a surge of divine power, leaps forward, faster than a falcon, the swiftest of all winged creatures. In this sleep, the old Odysseus, the homeless, stateless wanderer, is symbolically dying so that the king of Ithaca can be reborn on his own shore. The ship devours the distance, crossing the dark sea in a single night. As the morning star, the brightest of all, rises in the sky to herald the coming of rosy-fingered dawn, the vessel arrives at Ithaca. The Phaeacian sailors, possessing an innate magical knowledge of the sea, do not go to the main harbour, which would be bustling and public. Instead, they steer into a quiet, protected bay, sacred to the ancient sea god Forces. It is a place of primal sanctity. At the head of this bay stands a great, long-leafed olive tree, a tree that will become a recurring symbol of Odysseus' identity, and nearby is a dusky sacred cave, cool and mysterious, dedicated to the naiads, the nymphs of the springs, where they weave their sea-purple webs on stone looms. Here, in this liminal space between the sea and the land, they bring the ship to rest. They lift the sleeping Odysseus, still wrapped in his blankets, as if he were a sacred object or a child, and gently place him on the sand of his homeland. He does not stir from his death-like slumber. They then unload the vast Phaeacian treasure and stack it carefully at the base of the olive tree, away from the main path, where it might be stolen by some casual, opportunistic thief before the king can claim it. Their sacred duty is now complete. They board their ship and turn for home. But their supreme act of kindness, this fulfillment of their cultural mandate to escort travelers, will not go unpunished. The god Poseidon, the Earthshaker, has not forgotten his deep-seated grudge. His anger has been simmering throughout Odysseus's stay in Scheria. He has been watching, and he is enraged that the Phaeacians, his own descendants, have so brazenly defied his will and brought his hated enemy home, not just safely, but in glory. He travels to Olympus and complains bitterly to Zeus, his words a challenge to the entire divine order. "Father Zeus," he says, "how can I ever expect to be honored among the gods again when mortal men, the Phaeacians, no longer show me any respect? I, who am your own brother." Zeus, in his role as the arbiter of cosmic disputes, must maintain a balance of power. He cannot allow one god's honor to be so publicly flouted, even in the service of a fate he himself has sanctioned. He essentially gives Poseidon permission to reassert his authority. "Do as your own heart desires," he says, providing a solution that will both punish the Phaeacians and satisfy Poseidon's wrath. Poseidon swoops down from Olympus. As the Phaeacian ship is gliding triumphantly into its own harbor, in full view of all its people who have gathered on the shore to welcome it home, the sea god intercepts it. He strikes the ship with the flat of his hand and, in a terrifying display of divine power, turns the entire vessel and its crew to stone. He roots it to the seabed just at the mouth of the harbor. it becomes a permanent, terrible monument, a man-made island of stone, a stark and eternal reminder of the wrath of a god. The ancient prophecy that old King Alcinous had feared has come to pass. The Phaeacians' bridge to the outside world, their generosity and their love of escorting travelers, has been sealed off forever. Their supreme act of xenia has cost them their defining way of life. Meanwhile, back on the beach in Ithaca, Odysseus finally awakens from his profound sleep. He stirs, sits up, and looks around him. But Athena, in a final, crucial act of strategic caution, has shrouded the entire island in a thick, supernatural mist. She has altered the landscape, making it appear alien and unfamiliar. The familiar landmarks he should have recognized instantly, the harbor, Mount Neriton, are hidden from his view. He is, in effect, in a different world. His first emotion is not the joy of arrival, but a fresh, devastating wave of despair and paranoia. The familiar, bitter taste of betrayal fills his mouth. He is convinced that the Phaeacians have tricked him. He believes they have made a mockery of their promises, that they have dumped him on some unknown, hostile shore, having stolen his treasure while he slept. His mind, conditioned by 2 decades of hardship, treachery, and divine malice, cannot accept good fortune at face value. It immediately seeks the trap, the angle, the deception. This is the tragic psychological cost of his long ordeal. He is a man so accustomed to suffering that he can no longer recognize salvation. "Alas!" he cries aloud, smiting his thighs in a gesture of utter frustration. "To what mortal's land have I come now? Are they violent and savage and without justice, or are they God-fearing and hospitable to strangers?" He frantically counts his treasure, relieved to find it all there, but this only deepens his anger at the Phaeacians, whom he now curses for their perceived treachery, for abandoning him. He is a king who does not know his kingdom, a native who is now an alien. The mist is a powerful physical manifestation of his profound psychological alienation. He has been away so long that he and his home have become strangers to one another. He must be reintroduced to his own identity. It is at this moment of peak distress that Athena chooses to appear. But ever the strategist, she does not come to him as the formidable goddess he knows. That would be too direct. She takes on the guise of a young shepherd boy, a local, delicate of feature, like the son of a king. She is the perfect figure to disarm his suspicion, a seemingly innocent source of local knowledge. Odysseus, his mind immediately snapping into its default mode of cunning and self-preservation, approaches the boy. He does not ask the most obvious question, "Where am I?" as that would betray his utter helplessness. Instead, he asks about the land, what it is called, who lives there. The shepherd boy Athena feigns surprise. "Stranger," she says, "you must be a fool, or have come from a very distant land, not to have heard of Ithaca." She describes the island, a rocky place, not good for horses, but a good nurse of young men. At the word Ithaca, a jolt of incandescent joy must pass through Odysseus's heart, but he does not let a flicker of it show on his face. The habit of concealment, honed over 20 years, is now second nature. He does not drop his guard and reveal his true identity, even now. Instead, with a speed and creativity that is breathtaking, he begins to spin a new identity for himself. He launches into his first Cretan lie. Crete, for Odysseus, is his go-to source for fictional backstories. It was a cosmopolitan island known for its pirates, mercenaries, and complex politics, a plausible origin for a wandering man of action. He claims to be a fugitive from that island, a wealthy man who killed the son of the great Cretan king Idomeneus in a dispute over Trojan spoils. He invents a complex narrative involving Phoenician traders who he claims betrayed him and left him here while he slept. It is a masterpiece of improvisation, filled with convincing, mundane details, a story designed to elicit pity and establish a persona of a wronged but dangerous man. Athena listens to this entire fabrication, a delighted, knowing smile playing on her lips. She is not just his patron, she is his biggest fan. When he is finished, she reaches out and her form changes. The shepherd boy dissolves, and in his place stands the tall, beautiful, and formidable goddess of wisdom. "You wretch," she says, her voice filled not with anger, as a modern listener might expect, but with a deep, almost maternal affection and a connoisseur's professional respect. "You wily, cunning, incorrigible schemer. Anyone, even a god, who was to match you in trickery would have to be a master of the art." Even here, in your own country, standing on your own soil, you cannot give up the deceptions and the fictions that you love from the bottom of your heart. This is not a rebuke, it is the highest form of compliment from his divine counterpart. She is celebrating the very quality, his métis, that she herself embodies. But let us have no more of this, she continues, for we are two of a kind. You and I understand these things. You are the best of all mortals in counsel and in speech, and I am famous among all the gods for my wisdom and my cunning. This is a moment of profound recognition, the ultimate meeting of minds. She is confirming their special bond, their shared nature. She then disperses the mist with a wave of her hand, and the familiar, beloved landscape of Ithaca, the harbour of Forces, the sun-drenched slopes of Mount Neriton, the sacred cave of the nymphs, is revealed to him in all its glory. Odysseus, his last doubt finally erased, falls to his knees and kisses the fertile earth of his homeland, his heart overflowing with a joy so deep it is almost painful. Together, goddess and mortal plan the final act. It is a war council. Athena lays out the grim situation in his palace in stark detail. The more than 100 arrogant suitors, their endless feasting, their insolent consumption of his wealth, their brazen designs on his wife, their plot to murder his son. She confirms that his return must be a secret. Vengeance requires reconnaissance, and reconnaissance requires the ultimate disguise. He must become a nobody one last time in order to become king again. And so, with a touch of her golden wand, Athena performs a terrible, reverse beautification. She transforms him into the very image of abject human misery. His supple skin withers and wrinkles like that of a very old man. She dims the fire in his eyes, making him look weak and pitiful. The dark, curly hair on his head vanishes, leaving him bald. She clothes his body in filthy, tattered rags, grimy with greasy smoke. She gives him a staff to support his now feeble frame and a tattered beggar's pouch slung over his shoulder on a twisted cord. He is made utterly unrecognizable. The glorious, godlike hero who sacked Troy is now a decrepit, anonymous vagrant, the lowest of the low. He must descend to the absolute bottom of the social ladder in order to launch
Athena then gives him his first
instructions. He is to go to the hut of his loyal swineherd, Eumaeus. He has been loyal to you in his heart always, she says, and loves your son and your wise Penelope. His first stop is not the palace, the center of corruption, but the periphery, the heartland of loyalty. He must begin his reclamation of Ithaca from the ground up, starting with its most humble, yet most virtuous soul. As Odysseus, now in his beggar's disguise, makes his way up the rocky path toward the swineherd's isolated homestead, we are given a detailed picture of this man, Eumaeus, and his life. He is not just a menial servant, he is a conscientious steward, a protector of his master's property in his absence. He has built the courtyard for the pigs himself, a sturdy, well-made enclosure of stone and timber. He is a man of competence, order, and integrity. As Odysseus approaches, Eumaeus's 4 fierce, wolf-like guard dogs rush out, barking ferociously, ready to tear him to pieces. It is a moment of genuine peril, but Eumaeus acts quickly. He drops the piece of leather he was cutting for sandals, shouts at the dogs, and pelts them with a shower of stones to drive them off. He saves the stranger from his own animals. His first words to Odysseus are profoundly revealing of his character. "Old man," he says, his voice filled with genuine concern, "my dogs nearly ripped you to pieces a moment ago. That would have brought shame and sorrow upon me, on top of all the other pains the gods have given me." His immediate concern is not for his own safety, but for the potential violation of hospitality and the dishonor it would bring him. This single reaction tells us everything we need to know about his moral compass. He leads the beggar into his hut. He prepares a seat for him, piling up thick rushes and covering them with the shaggy hide of a wild goat. He offers him the best of what he has. He then goes out and slaughters 2 of his best young pigs for their meal, roasts them on spits, and serves them to his guest, all before even asking his name or his business. This is Xenia in its purest, most instinctive form, a stark and deliberate contrast to the calculated abuse Odysseus will soon receive in his own palace. As they eat, Eumaeus begins to talk, and his speech is a long, sorrowful river of grief and loyalty. He speaks constantly of his gentle and kind master, Odysseus, who he is certain is dead, perished on some distant shore. He laments the state of the kingdom, cursing the godless suitors for their hubris, their arrogance, and their endless consumption of the estate's wealth. His monologue is not just an expression of personal feeling, it is a detailed intelligence briefing for the silent, listening king. Odysseus learns firsthand of the moral rot that has infested his home, and more importantly, he receives absolute confirmation of the swineherd's unwavering loyalty. Odysseus, playing his part as the beggar, listens patiently. He then tells his own story, another elaborate Cretan lie, full of adventure, wealth, and eventual ruin. It is a story designed to echo his own, a tale of a great warrior brought low by fortune. But within this web of fiction, he weaves a thread of truth, a test. He claims to have heard news of Odysseus from the Thesprotians. He declares, with the force of a sworn oath, that Odysseus is alive and will return home within the month. But Eumaeus's heart is too shielded by the scar tissue of 20 years of disappointment to accept it. "Old man," he says sadly, his voice heavy, "you will not persuade me. Too many vagrants have come here with false tales, hoping for a reward from my mistress. My heart is sick with grief for my master." His loyalty is so profound that it no longer requires the fuel of hope. It is an unshakable part of his being, a fixed point in a world of chaos. Their time together in the hut, which spans several books of the epic, is a long and detailed exploration of loyalty, memory, and decency. We even learn Eumaeus's own backstory. He is not a common man by birth, but the son of a king from a distant island, kidnapped as a child by a treacherous Phoenician nurse and sold into slavery to Odysseus's father, Laertes. He was raised in the palace alongside Odysseus's own sister, Ctimene, treated almost as a member of the family. This deepens our understanding of his loyalty. It is born of a foundational kindness he received long ago, a debt of gratitude he has been repaying with his entire life. Into this haven of rustic loyalty, Telemachus arrives. Having been warned by Athena in Sparta, and having skillfully evaded the suitor's murderous ambush by landing on a different part of the coast, he makes his way directly to the swineherd's hut, as the goddess instructed. The scene of his arrival is deeply moving. The dogs, who viciously attacked the beggar, greet Telemachus with joyful fawning and whining. Eumaeus, seeing the young prince, drops his work and runs to him, covering his face and hands with kisses, weeping with overwhelming relief, like a father welcoming home his only son after 10 years away. Telemachus enters the hut. He sees the old beggar and, showing the innate nobility and compassion he has cultivated on his journey, he insists that the stranger not give up his seat for him. Odysseus and his son are in the same room for the first time in 20 years, but the moment of recognition, the anagnorisis, is still to come. Odysseus sends Eumaeus to the palace with a message for Penelope to let her know in secret that her son has returned safely. Now father and son are alone in the hut. This is the moment Athena has orchestrated. She appears at the doorway, visible only to Odysseus. She signals to him with her eyebrows that the time has come. She touches Odysseus with her golden wand, and the magic of his disguise dissolves in an instant. The beggar's filthy rags are replaced with a fresh cloak and tunic. His body becomes strong and supple again, his skin tanned, his jaw firm, his beard dark. He is no longer a beggar, but a king, radiating a godlike power and grace. He turns to his son. Telemachus is paralyzed with terror and awe. He shields his eyes with his hands, convinced he is in the presence of a god. "Stranger," he gasps, his voice trembling. "You are not the same man who was here just now. Your clothes are different, your skin is new. You must be one of the gods who live in wide heaven." Odysseus must now bridge the chasm of 20 years and the even greater chasm of impossibility. "I am no god," he says gently, his voice thick with emotion. "Why do you liken me to the immortals? No, I am your father, the one for whom you have been yearning, enduring so much pain and so many insults from violent men." But Telemachus, his rational mind struggling to accept what his eyes are seeing, refuses to believe it. It is too much like a miracle. "No," he insists, "you are not my father Odysseus. You are some spirit, some daimon, trying to deceive me and make my grief even worse." Odysseus patiently explains the power of his patron, Athena, the goddess who can make him seem a beggar or a king at will. "It is no great thing," he says, "for a goddess to do." And then finally, the simple, unbelievable truth breaks through his son's defenses. Telemachus lets out a great cry and throws his arms around the father he has never known. Both men break down, holding each other and weeping, their cries a raw, piercing lament that fills the small hut. Homer describes their cry as being more shrill and piercing than that of birds of prey, like eagles or vultures with crooked talons, whose nests have been robbed of their unfledged young by farmers. It is a cry not just of joy, but of 20 years of pent-up grief, loss, and profound longing, finally and violently released. Their tender reunion, however, quickly gives way to the hard business of revenge. Their shared grief is immediately channeled into a shared, deadly purpose. This conspiracy of righteous violence forges an immediate, powerful bond between them. Odysseus, the master strategist, quizzes his son on the number of suitors. Telemachus counts them, 52 from Dulichium, 24 from Same, 20 from Zakynthus, and 12 from Ithaca itself, plus their heralds and servants. The total is well over 100 men. The odds are staggering. Telemachus is daunted, but Odysseus, his faith in his own cunning and in Athena's power absolute, is undeterred. "We two will be enough," he declares. He lays out the plan. Telemachus will go to the palace first and mingle with the suitors. Odysseus will follow, once more in the guise of the beggar. At a signal from his father, Telemachus will remove all the weapons, the spears, shields, and swords that are mounted on the walls of the great hall. If the suitors ask, he is to give a placating excuse, that he is moving them to protect them from the smoke of the fire, or to prevent them from being used in a drunken brawl. Then, when the time is right, they, along with the two herdsmen they can trust, will face their enemies. The son, who began the epic as a timid boy lost in daydreams, is now a willing and crucial co-conspirator in a righteous and bloody coup d'etat. The scene now shifts to the palace. Odysseus, back in his beggar's disguise, makes his way toward his own home. At the gate, a moment of profound and heartbreaking pathos unfolds. Lying on a dung heap, abandoned by the servants, neglected and infested with ticks, is an ancient dog. It is Argos, the dog Odysseus himself trained as a puppy just before he left for Troy. 20 years have passed. The dog, once swift and strong, is now on the verge of death. But as Odysseus draws near, the dog's senses, which have not failed him, recognize his master's scent and voice. He is too weak to get up, too old to run to his master, but he thumps his tail and drops his ears in a final, feeble gesture of love and recognition. Odysseus sees him and must turn his head to hide a tear. It is one of the few times we see him weep for a loss that is not his own homecoming. He cannot acknowledge the dog without blowing his cover. He can only ask Eumaeus about the animal, feigning ignorance, and listen as the swineherd tells him of the fine hound Argos used to be in the service of his long-lost master. As Odysseus and Eumaeus pass through the gates into the palace, the faithful dog Argos, having fulfilled his own long 20-year vigil and seen his master one last time, breathes his last. His death is a quiet, tragic symbol of the old, loyal Ithaca that has been left to decay in the master's absence. The loyalty of an animal stands as a silent rebuke to the disloyalty of the men feasting inside. Inside the hall, Odysseus the beggar is immediately subjected to the suitor's cruelty. He begins to beg from each man, a deliberate test of their character. Most give him something out of pity or a flicker of superstitious fear that he might be a god in disguise. But the ringleader, the violent and arrogant Antinous, explodes with fury. He insults the beggar, and then, in an act of supreme hubris and a catastrophic violation of Xenia, he picks up a footstool and hurls it at Odysseus, striking him hard on the right shoulder. Odysseus stands as immovable as a rock. He does not even stagger. He simply shakes his head in silence, his mind, as Homer tells us, seething with dark thoughts. This is the point of no return. Antinous has physically assaulted a guest, who is secretly the master of the house and a man under the personal protection of Zeus Xenios in that master's own hall. He has signed his own death warrant. The blow does not harm Odysseus physically, but it solidifies his resolve to show no mercy. Another beggar, a local bully named Arneus but nicknamed Iris, after the messenger goddess Iris because he ran errands, challenges Odysseus. He sees this new beggar as competition for the scraps from the suitors' table. The suitors, seeking cruel entertainment, egg them on, promising the winner a goat's paunch filled with blood and fat. The fight is a microcosm of the larger conflict. Odysseus, to the astonishment of the suitors, strips off his rags to reveal a powerful, muscular physique. He considers killing Iris with a single blow, but, with his characteristic self-control, restrains his true strength, delivering a single, calculated punch to the jaw that shatters it and ends the fight instantly. He asserts his dominance even in his lowly disguise. That evening, the crucial meeting between Odysseus and Penelope takes place. It is a scene of almost unbearable tension, a masterclass in psychological drama and sustained dramatic irony. As the beggar, Odysseus is brought before the queen. She, ever cautious, ever testing, begins her interrogation. He, the master of deception, weaves his most intricate Cretan lie. He tells her he is Ethan, a man who once hosted her husband. To prove his story, to make it painfully real for her, he describes Odysseus's clothing and a distinctive golden brooch with such flawless, vivid accuracy. The brooch depicts a hound gripping a struggling fawn in its jaws, a stark image of predator and prey that Penelope is completely convinced. She breaks down, weeping for the husband who is sitting right in front of her, a living man whose death she now mourns anew. Odysseus, his own heart aching as he watches his wife's genuine grief, must maintain his composure. He offers her comfort, and then he makes a solemn, sworn oath. Odysseus, he says, is alive. He has heard that he is nearby, at the land of the Thesprotians, and that he is laden with treasure. He will be home, the beggar declares, within the month, before the new moon rises. Penelope is deeply moved, but after 20 years, her hope is sheathed in a protective layer of skepticism. "If only your words would come true, stranger," she says, her voice filled with a weary sadness. Still, she is impressed by this stranger's noble bearing. She offers him hospitality and commands her old nurse, Euryclea, to wash his feet. This seemingly simple act of hospitality becomes a moment of high drama. As the old woman, who was Odysseus's own nursemaid, washes his legs, her familiar hands run over a deep, old scar on his thigh, the result of a boar hunt on Mount Parnassus in his youth. It is his indelible mark, a part of his physical identity that cannot be disguised by rags or divine magic. Recognition dawns instantly. The past floods back to her. Joy and shock contort her face. She drops his leg. The bronze basin clangs against the floor. She turns to Penelope, her mouth open to cry out the secret, to announce the impossible truth. But Odysseus, ever alert, acts with lightning speed and lethal intensity. He grabs her by the throat with his powerful right hand, silencing her, while with his left he pulls her close. "Nurse," he whispers fiercely, "do you want to destroy me? You who suckled me at your own breast, keep silent, or I swear by the gods that if I am successful in killing these suitors, I will not spare you, even though you are my own nurse when I kill the other faithless women in my house." Euryclea, her heart torn between overwhelming joy and mortal terror, nods her assent and swears an oath of silence. The secret is safe, but it is a secret now shared by a small, growing conspiracy within the palace walls. Later that night, Penelope approaches the beggar again, her mind still in turmoil. She tells him of a dream she had, a dream of a great eagle coming down from the mountain and slaughtering her 20 pet geese, and then a voice explaining that the eagle was her husband returned and the geese the suitors. Odysseus, the master interpreter, tells her the dream is clear, its meaning transparent. But Penelope, ever cautious, expresses her profound skepticism about the nature of truth and illusion. Dreams, she says, are difficult, baffling things. They can come to mortals through two gates: the gate of polished horn for dreams that come true, and the gate of sawn ivory for dreams that are deceptive and bear no fruit. She fears this dream, too good to be true, came through the gate of ivory. Then she reveals her fateful decision, a plan that she has devised herself, a final test for fate. She tells the stranger that she can hold out no longer. The next day, she will announce a contest for the suitors. She will bring out her husband's great bow. The man who can most easily string the bow and then shoot an arrow through the 12 axe heads she will have Telemachus line up in the hall will win her hand in marriage. It is a test of strength and skill she is certain no one but Odysseus can pass. It is her final, desperate gamble, a test so impossible it is almost a declaration of faith in her husband's return. Odysseus, the beggar, smiles a grim, knowing smile. He tells her to hold the contest without delay. "For," he says, "the wily Odysseus will be here before any of these men can handle that polished bow, string it, and shoot through the iron." The day of judgment arrives. Penelope, with tears streaming down her face, retrieves the great bow from the storeroom. The bow is more than a weapon. It is a symbol of Odysseus's unique kingship, a gift from a friend, Iphitus, that he never took to war but kept at home as a sign of his singular power and identity. In the Great Hall, Telemachus sets up the 12 axes. He himself attempts to string the bow, and on his 4th try, he would have succeeded, a clear and public sign that he has truly come of age and is ready to assume his father's mantle. But a subtle, silent shake of the head from his father stops him. The glory and the definitive proof of identity must belong to the king alone. The suitors try one after another. Their attempts are pathetic. They are revealed to be soft, weak, men of indulgence rather than heroic strength. They cannot even begin to bend the bow. As they fail, Odysseus slips out of the hall and reveals his true identity to his 2 most loyal servants, Eumaeus the swineherd and Philoetius the cowherd. He shows them his scar as irrefutable proof. They weep with joy and pledge their unwavering support. He gives them their crucial orders. Eumaeus is to bring him the bow when the time is right, and Philoetius is to lock the outer gates of the courtyard, trapping the suitors inside. Back in the hall, all the major suitors have tried and failed miserably. The arrogant Antinous suggests they postpone the contest, make sacrifices to Apollo, the archer god, and try again tomorrow. It is at this moment of delay that the beggar speaks. In a humble, deferential voice, he asks if he might be allowed to try his hand at the bow, not to compete for the magnificent prize of the queen, but simply to test if his old strength has deserted him in his wanderings. The suitors erupt in a firestorm of furious, scornful insults. Antinous viciously berates him, terrified of the public shame if this filthy beggar should succeed where they have all failed. But Penelope intervenes, her royal authority flashing. She insists that the stranger be given a chance. Telemachus then seizes the moment, asserting his newfound authority as master of the house. He orders his mother to go to her chambers, telling her that the bow is the business of men, and most of all, mine. He then commands a reluctant Eumaeus to bring the bow to the beggar. Amid the jeers and threats of the suitors, Eumaeus places the great bow into the hands of its true master. Odysseus handles it with the loving, expert familiarity of a master musician handling his lyre. He inspects it, turning it over and over, checking the wood, the horn, the string. Then, with an ease that is both terrifying and beautiful to behold, he strings it. He plucks the string with his finger, and it sings with a clear, sharp note, like the cry of a swallow. A deathly pallor falls over the suitors. Their jeers die in their throats. And at that exact moment, Zeus thunders his approval from the heavens, a clear and terrifying omen. Odysseus smiles. He takes an arrow from the quiver, sets it to the string, and without even rising from his stool, he draws back the bowstring, takes aim, and releases. The arrow flies true, a clean, perfect shot, whispering through the tiny socket holes of all 12 axes. He turns to his son. "Telemachus," he says, his voice now devoid of any humility, filled with cold purpose. "The guest in your hall has not disgraced you." Telemachus steps to his side, his bronze spear glinting in the firelight. The trap is set. Odysseus leaps to the great stone threshold of the hall, casting off his rags, a king revealed in all his terrifying power. He pours the arrows from his quiver at his feet. "The contest is over," he shouts, his voice thundering through the hall. "Now let me see if I can hit another target, one that no man has ever hit before." He whips the bow around, and before anyone can react, he shoots an arrow straight through the throat of Antinous, who is in the act of raising a golden cup of wine to his lips. The cup falls, the wine spills, and Antinous collapses, dead. Chaos erupts. The suitors, thinking it was a wild, accidental shot, leap up, shouting threats. They look to the walls for their own weapons, but the walls are bare. It is only then that Odysseus reveals himself, his voice filled with the chilling authority of a vengeful god. "You dogs," he roars, You thought I would never come home from Troy. You devoured my house. You raped my serving women. You courted my wife while I was still alive. You feared neither the gods nor the vengeance of men. Now the ropes of death are fast upon you all. Fear, cold and absolute, grips them. Eurymachus, the smooth talker, tries to plead for their lives. He blames everything on the dead Antinous and offers to make full restitution, to repay everything they have consumed. But Odysseus's justice is not about compensation. It is absolute, primordial, and cleansing. There will be no payment that will save you, he declares. The only choice is to fight or to flee, and I do not think any of you will escape. He then shoots Eurymachus through the chest, and the second great leader of the suitors falls. The slaughter, the Menesteraphonia, begins. It is a brutal, bloody, and one-sided battle. Odysseus, Telemachus, and their two loyal herdsmen fight against the more than 100 suitors who are trapped and unarmed in the locked hall. Athena is present, sometimes as mentor, deflecting spears and giving encouragement, her divine aegis flashing over the hall, striking terror into the suitors. They are cut down without mercy. The floor of the great hall becomes slick with blood and littered with the bodies of the dead, piled up, as Homer graphically describes, like fish that fishermen have dragged from the grey sea in a net and thrown upon the sand. The 20-year corruption has been purged from the house in a baptism of blood. The aftermath is just as grim and methodical. Odysseus calls for Euryclea, who finds him standing among the corpses, spattered with blood and gore like a lion. He then deals with the disloyal members of his household. The 12 servant girls who slept with the suitors and scorned Penelope are brought out. They are forced to perform the horrific task of cleaning the hall, dragging the bodies of their dead lovers outside and washing the blood from the tables and chairs. Then Telemachus takes them into the courtyard and, showing a new, hard-edged cruelty he has learned from his father, hangs them all from a single rope, their feet twitching in the air. The oikos is being purged of all its impurities. Now, only one reunion remains, the most important, the most difficult, and the true climax of the entire epic. Euryclea, her heart bursting with joy, runs up to Penelope's chamber to tell her the news. Odysseus is home, and he has killed all the suitors. But Penelope's reaction is not one of immediate joy. Her mind, a fortress built over 20 years of grief and false hope, refuses to accept it. She cannot allow herself to believe. She thinks it must be a trick, or that some god has descended and killed the suitors in anger. Her caution, which might seem cold, is a testament to the depth of her long suffering and the strength of her character. She will not be made a fool of again. She comes downstairs to the great hall. The scene is tense and strange. She sees her son, and she sees a man who looks like her husband, but she cannot bridge the gap of 20 years. She sits across the room from him, silent, studying him, her face a mask of uncertainty. Telemachus, with the impatience of youth, is exasperated by her coldness. "Mother," he cries, "your heart is harder than a stone. How can you sit so far from my father?" But Odysseus understands. He smiles, a knowing, patient smile. "Let your mother test me in her own way," he tells his son. "She will soon know me better." He knows that their reunion cannot be based on appearance, which can be changed by a god, or on a physical scar, which can be faked. It must be based on something deeper, a secret that only the two of them share, a sign embedded in the very structure of their lives together. He goes to bathe. Athena enhances his appearance one last time, making him look as he did in his prime, a true king, tall and powerful. He returns, radiating grace and authority, and sits opposite her again. Still, she is silent, testing him with her distance. Finally, frustrated, he says, "Strange woman, the gods on Olympus have given you a heart more stubborn than any other. No other wife would sit so far from her husband who has come back to her after 20 years of suffering." And now, Penelope sets her final, brilliant trap. It is a test of the mind, a test of shared memory. She turns to the nurse, Euryclea, and says with an air of cool command, "Come, move the sturdy bed out of our master bedroom, the one he built himself, and make it up with fleeces and blankets for him." This is the key that unlocks his identity. Odysseus, who has been patient and calm, finally explodes with genuine heartfelt panic and outrage. It is not a feigned anger, it is the shock of a man whose deepest, most sacred secret has been violated. "Woman," he cries, his voice filled with the shock of sacrilege. "Your words have cut me to the heart. Who has moved my bed? It would be a difficult job even for the best of craftsmen, unless a god himself came down and moved it. No mortal man could. For there is a great sign, a secret in that bed. I myself built it, and no one else." He then reveals the secret that only the two of them could possibly know. There was a great, long-leafed olive tree growing in our courtyard, its trunk as thick as a pillar. I built our bedroom around that very tree. I cut off its foliage, trimmed the trunk from the root up, and planed it smooth. I shaped that rooted stump into the main post of our bed. I built the rest of the bed around it, inlaying it with gold and silver and ivory. It is a sign, a secret that only we know. Has some man cut the olive trunk and moved my bed? He has revealed the secret. The bed is not just a piece of furniture. It is the living, rooted symbol of their marriage, built from the very earth of their home, immovable and unique. It is the physical manifestation of their oikos, a fusion of nature and human craft, just as their marriage is a fusion of two natures. His raw, unfeigned, intimate knowledge of this unmovable foundation of their life together is the final, irrefutable proof of his identity. Penelope's long-held defenses, the fortress of grief she has built around her heart for 2 decades, finally crumble. Her knees go weak and she dissolves in tears. She runs to him, throws her arms around his neck and kisses him. "Do not be angry with me, Odysseus," she weeps. "You who are the wisest of all men, the gods have denied us a life together in our youth, and now we must make up for it." Homer describes her relief with one of his most beautiful and profound similes. The joy she feels is like the joy that shipwrecked sailors feel when they finally, after a long battle with the sea, catch sight of land. For 20 years, Odysseus has been the sailor lost at sea, but in this moment, the roles are reversed. Penelope has been the one tossed on the waves of grief, and her husband is the solid ground, the safe harbor she has finally reached. Their nostos is complete, not just a reunion of bodies, but a reunion of two minds who are truly alike. A perfect state of homophrosyne. The epic concludes with a final tying up of loose ends in its 24th and final book. The souls of the dead suitors, led by Hermes, are shown chittering like bats as they descend into the land of the dead, where they recount their demise to the shades of Agamemnon and Achilles. Odysseus, his household now cleansed, goes to the countryside to reunite with his ancient grieving father Laertes, whom he finds living in squalor on his farm, a mirror of the kingdom's decay. He tests the old man one last time before revealing himself, and their tender reunion completes the 3-generational patriarchal line of Ithaca. A final brief conflict flares up as the families of the slain suitors march on the palace seeking revenge. But Athena, with a final command and a thunderbolt from Zeus, intervenes and establishes a lasting, divinely enforced peace on the island. And so, after 20 years of war and wandering, of trials that tested the absolute limits of human endurance and cunning, the king is home. Order is restored to the kingdom, justice has been served, and the family is once more whole. The great journey is over. The hero is at rest in his own house, in his own unmovable bed, with his own wise and faithful wife. The story of the long return, the ultimate nostos, is, at last, truly and completely finished. And so, we leave him there. Odysseus, the man of many turns, the sacker of cities, the great survivor, is finally at rest in his own land. The sea lanes are behind him, the monsters are vanquished, the traitors are punished, and the deep, anchoring roots of his olive tree bed hold him fast to the earth of his home. His journey is complete. Thank you for sharing this time, for lending your attention to this ancient and enduring story. I hope it has brought you some measure of focus, of calm, or perhaps a gentle passage into your own world of dreams. As our time together in this quiet, literary space comes to a close, let us take a few moments to step back from the narrative itself and consider the immense, shadowy figure who stands behind it and the world from which this story first emerged. Who was Homer? The simple and perhaps most honest answer is that we do not know for certain. The name Homer is a ghost in the machine of history. The ancient Greeks themselves had little concrete information. They believed him to be a blind bard, a wandering Aoidos, who lived sometime in the 8th or perhaps early 7th century BCE. The island of Chios and the city of Smyrna, both in what is now modern-day Turkey, were the most prominent of the 7 cities that laid claim to being his birthplace. The image of the blind poet is a powerful one, embodied in the character of Demodocus in the Odyssey itself, the bard whom the muse loved. And though she took away his sight, she gave him the gift of sweet song. This blindness is perhaps more symbolic than literal, suggesting a poet who saw not with his physical eyes, but with the inner eye of memory, imagination, and divine inspiration. For centuries, the primary question surrounding Homer was not about his biography, but about his very existence. Scholars in the 19th century, in what came to be known as the Homeric question, debated whether the Iliad and the Odyssey were the work of a single, brilliant, individual genius, or if they were the culmination of a long tradition of oral poetry stitched together by a later editor or series of editors. This was the great debate between the annalists, who sought to break the poems down into their constituent parts, and the Unitarians, who argued for the artistic unity and single authorship of each epic. The groundbreaking work of a 20th century American scholar named Milman Parry and later his student Albert Lord revolutionized our understanding of this question. By studying the living oral traditions of epic singers in Yugoslavia, Parry demonstrated that it was possible for non-literate poets to compose and perform massively long, complex, and coherent poems using a sophisticated system of formulas, epithets, and repeated thematic scenes, the very building blocks we have seen throughout the Odyssey. This research did not necessarily disprove the existence of a single genius named Homer, but it reframed the question. It suggests that Homer, if he was a single person, was not an author in our modern sense, sitting alone in a room and writing a novel. He was more likely the inheritor and the supreme master of a centuries-old oral tradition. He was the figure who, at a pivotal moment in history, the moment when the Greeks were readopting the technology of writing, this time using the Phoenician alphabet, transferred this magnificent oral art form into a fixed, written text. He may have been the one who dictated the poem, or the one who first wrote it down, giving it the monumental structure and thematic depth that has allowed it to endure. He stands, therefore, not at the beginning of a tradition, but at its glorious culmination, a bridge between the unrecorded world of the sung word and the permanent world of the written one. And what of the story itself? Is there any truth to it? For a long time, the Trojan War and the subsequent wanderings of heroes like Odysseus were considered to be pure myth, foundational fictions created by the Greeks to explain their own origins. But in the 1870s, a wealthy German amateur archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann, a man obsessed with Homer since childhood, took the epics as a literal guide. He began excavating a large mound in northwestern Turkey called Hisarlik. To the astonishment of the academic world, he uncovered the ruins of a great Bronze Age citadel, a city with multiple layers of destruction and rebuilding, which corresponds in many ways to the descriptions of Troy in the Iliad. He later excavated at Mycenae, the home of Agamemnon, and found spectacular golden treasures, including a now famous golden death mask he mistakenly believed belonged to Agamemnon himself. Schliemann's discoveries, while often reckless and unscientific by modern standards, proved that there was a historical reality behind the myths. There was indeed a sophisticated, powerful, and wealthy civilization in Greece during the late Bronze Age, what we now call the Mycenaean civilization, that flourished between roughly 1600 and 1100 BCE. And there likely was a historical conflict, or a series of conflicts, between these Greek kingdoms and the city of Troy over control of trade routes. The Odyssey, then, can be seen as a story born from a profound cultural trauma. Around 1200 BCE, this vibrant Mycenaean civilization collapsed. The great palaces were burned, the art of writing was lost, trade routes were severed, and Greece entered a period of several centuries of poverty and depopulation that scholars call the Greek Dark Ages. When the darkness began to lift, around the 8th century BCE, the Greeks were looking back, trying to piece together who they were. The stories of the Trojan War were folk memories, grand, distorted echoes of a lost golden age of mighty kings and great heroes. The Odyssey is a product of this later period, a time of renewed exploration, colonization, and trade. The wanderings of Odysseus, with his encounters with strange peoples and magical islands across the Mediterranean, reflect the spirit of this new age of Greek expansion. But at its heart, the poem is imbued with a deep sense of loss and a powerful longing for stability. It is a story about restoring a home that has fallen into chaos, about re-establishing order in a disordered world. The suitors, in many ways, represent the chaos of the Dark Ages, the breakdown of law, the rule of petty tyrants, the squandering of past glories. Odysseus's return is the return of civilization itself. It is a story that has never lost its power to captivate us, because it speaks to something fundamental in the human condition. We are all, in some sense, on a journey home. We all navigate the treacherous waters of experience, facing our own monsters, whether they be external challenges or the flaws within ourselves. We are all tempted by our own sirens and lotus eaters, the voices that call us to abandon our purpose for easy pleasure or blissful ignorance. And we all, ultimately, long for a place of belonging, a place where we are known and loved, a place where, like Odysseus in his unmovable bed, we are rooted. The Odyssey is not just a story about a journey, it is a journey. And for sharing a part of that journey with me tonight, I thank you. I hope that as you go forward into the rest of your day or the depths of your night, you carry with you a small piece of its quiet, its endurance, and its timeless wisdom. Until we meet again in these quiet halls of story, I wish you a very pleasant and a very peaceful rest.